The doors of the Galactic Conclave did not open so much as retreat, as if the chamber itself were afraid of what would step through. Praetor Vexen of the Celt Dominion entered with a warrior's stride, chitinous shoulders glittering like obsidian knives under the cold lights. 50 banners of 50 species coiled from the ceiling. Their colors said diversity, their silence said dread. By emergency right, intoned the speaker, a being of pale air named Luma, you have the floor. Vexen lifted a fist. The rim of Iron is ours by correction of history. We will seize the human colonies that defy proper tribute. The word human moved through the chamber like static. Some delegates stiffened. Others pretended to take notes while their eyes searched exits. Elder Archivist Calmer of the Vellum Circle, a scholar whose years were measured in the erosion of moons, simply watched. In the observation gallery, a human woman in a navy suit closed her eyes as if measuring the room's oxygen. Ambassador Naomi Reed, 43, calm, carrying her years the way a surgeon carries certainty, sent a brief message from a palm device. Celt announce annexation. Recommend Protocol 12. Surely you mean to negotiate, Luma tried. The humans. Farm, Vexen said, mandibles tilting in contempt. And pray. They have patrol skiffs and songs about peace. We have carriers. The chamber awakened, not with debate but with the muffled sounds of evacuation. Chairs scraping, translators spiking, private channels lighting up to distant capitals. Someone from the Knacker syndicate whispered, they don't remember. Calmer did. He stood, spine bending like the hinge of an ancient book. Praetor, what you call tribute was once called punishment. Empires that set themselves lessons they cannot pass tend to vanish from the syllabus. Vexen laughed, a metallic rattle. Archivist, your fables are footnotes to our hulls. Naomi Reed stepped to the rail. She did not raise her voice, yet the room cleared a path for it. Praetor Vexen, she said, I will put this in language even a war budget understands. You have time to turn around. We will not be insulted if you prefer wisdom to bravery. His black eyes reflected 100 lights. This is where the human issues a threat. This is where a physician warns a patient that fire burns. Naomi said, your hand is moving toward the stove. Luma, now very small within the dais of mist, tried one more appeal. No species has initiated a general action against humanity in a long time. Because they are superstitious, Vexen replied. Because they fear shadows that never touch them. Celt do not fear. Calmer looked at Naomi. There was sorrow there and anger trapped in glass. She tapped her device once more. Somewhere no one could see, a switch they had hoped to never touch again unlatched with a quiet, disappointed click. Name your timing, Naomi said. 72 hours, Vexen said with triumph. Our second and third fleets converge on Hearthfall. We will take the wheat from their mouths and the ore from their ground. Your farmers will learn to kneel. Naomi considered the word farmers. A lesson often attempted, she said, rarely passed. Vexen spread both arms, a stage actor with the script already memorized. Conclave record. The Celt Dominion serves notice of repossession of Iron. Interference will be treated as co-belligerency. Delegates rose in constellations of panic. The machine Daiichi rolled out on trembling gyros. The choral choir changed pitch to storm warning. On the far wall, emergency medics began laying out stretchers, though no one had been hurt yet. Naomi turned to the exits. At the threshold she paused, looked back not at Vexen but at the 50 banners. Please prepare humanitarian corridors, she told Luma, for Celt. Vexen barked a laugh. For my people, for your survivors, Naomi said. We never prepare corridors for humans. The doors retreated again and closed, leaving a chamber full of beings who suddenly remembered that history, like gravity, is not a belief but a law. In a quiet no microphone could capture, Calmer whispered a proverb older than treaties. Strength is not what you show, it is what you can refuse to use. He dearly hoped the humans could keep refusing. Beyond the station's acrylic skin, the stars kept their indifferent accounts. Somewhere among them, patient systems blinked from green to amber, then to the color that means a species has insisted on being taught. News does not travel faster than light. Fear does. In a dozen capitals, the same scene unfolded. Councils waking, generals rehearsing confidence they did not feel, economists performing triage on numbers that looked like lives. The Knacker Syndicate suspended all shipments into Kelt space and called it routine maintenance. The Cloud Cartel stopped renting their storage nebulae to Kelt carriers for reasons titled condensation irregularities. On a salt moon where the Vellum Circle kept its libraries, Elder Calmer boarded a courier built for apologies. The pilot, a young human with an old scar, nodded without smiling. Archivist, buckle in. I am to deliver warnings, Calmer said. I am unsure they change what warnings usually fail to change. Sometimes warnings are not for the warned, the pilot said. Sometimes they are for the record. They burned for Kelt Prime, a hive of black geometry set in a red ocean of sky. Praetor Vexen was not there. He toured the Second Fleet to rehearse victory speeches. Admiral Benkar received Calmer with a smirk the size of a continent. Archivist, Benkar said, you look upon inevitability, 2,000 hulls and growing. Your friends will plant their wheat for us. Calmer opened a worn folio. He did not show classified schematics or spy phantoms, just a drawing, a farmhouse, a field, a boy and a girl measuring shadows with a string. We fear rulers, he said. You should fear people who take measuring seriously. Benkar waved a hand. Human romance, we study tonnage and yields. Humans study consequences, Calmer replied. They domesticated fire, then domesticated themselves. The Admiral's smile grew cruel. Hearthfall has 12 orbital farms, 6 ore elevators, and civilian stations. We strike all simultaneously, exhaust their patrols, land shock brigades, broadcast terms. By the cycle's third hour, your measuring will end. Calmer's voice thinned. If you insist on learning, at least record your questions carefully. It will help your grandchildren. He was escorted out politely, the way one escorts the last priest from a city that has decided gods are inefficient. The courier lifted, its human pilot studying silent telemetry. When Calmer finally asked what the humans called the protocol Naomi had triggered, the pilot shrugged. Names change. The lesson does not. Elsewhere, Naomi Reed moved like a surgical instrument from room to room. She did not command fleets, she commanded conversations. With Luma, she secured conclave corridors for non-combatants. For Kelt, she repeated, and watched comprehension bruise the speaker's radiance. With the machine Daiichi, she negotiated a quarantine of autonomous code. No uplift packages into Kelt targeting software, she said. If they come asking, send them poetry. Poetry? The Daiichi hummed. Yes, Naomi said, it's safer. Hearthfall spun as it always spun. Children took turns riding a gravity skimmer. Farmers, Vexen had said, as if the word were a slur. On Hearthfall, farmers meant people who read soil like scripture, who could quote weather the way lawyers quote precedent, who understood that patience is not passivity, it is discipline at rest. At H-6 hours, the Celt Second Fleet departed the dark halo of an unnumbered dwarf world and lit its drives. At H-3, Merchant Lane 7B reported traffic irregularities. At H-1, Hearthfall Control flagged a diplomatic transit request from a tiny white craft with human registry. It parked itself where wise insects refuse to fly, directly in the path of a storm. Naomi appeared on every Celt tactical screen wearing the same navy suit, the same tone that makes knives into scalpels. Praetor Vexen, Admiral Benkar, you do not want this. You have 30 seconds to begin a turn. On the Praetor's pride, Vexen leaned into the image. One human ship, he said, is not a warning, it is an appetizer. 25 seconds, Naomi said softly. Weapons ready, Benkar told his bridge. On a lower deck, a junior Celt officer whispered to another, "Does it feel cold to you?" There was no draft. Cold sometimes means memory moving through a room. 15, Naomi said. Fire across the line, Vexen ordered, so the conclave will have good footage. Calmer, strapped into a chair on a courier far from anyone's story, closed his eyes and spoke to no one. For the record, he murmured, and hoped the record would be kind. The first missiles did not miss. They arrived at exactly the wrong address. They winked out not in explosions but in the quiet of equations solved. Celt beams, neat as ledger lines, rode across the void and found their ink soaked up by something that seemed to be nothing. Physics did not break. It yielded like a door a careful hand never meant to slam. Report, Admiral Benkar snarled. Contact absent, the censor chief said, as if the word itself were a mutiny. Hearthfall's 12 orbital farms yawned. Their petals were meant for sun and grain. Now panels rotated and locked, revealing ribs of dense geometry. What a Celt analyst had filed as processing silos revealed layered armor. Elevator pylons grew thorns, fields of point defense emitters. The quiet white craft remained in place like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence no one wanted read aloud. 10 seconds, Naomi Reed said. Her voice did not rise above conversation. The universe's loudest noises seldom do. Concentrate fire, Vexen roared. Overwhelm the 5. The human ship did not raise visible shields. Around it, space developed a sheen like heat above summer asphalt. Old textbooks would later call it a null shear, the polite phrase for please put your toys away. The Celt volley dissolved across that sheen as rain does into dry sand. 0, Naomi said. We will now conduct defensive actions. The first lesson arrived as a hairline of silver that did not pierce but edited. It touched a Celt cruiser amidships and subtracted the notion there is matter here. The cruiser obeyed the new sentence. It was not destroyed, it was omitted. Name that, Benkar hissed. Unclear, the chief whispered. No thermal bloom, no debris, no remainder. The second lesson was less surgical. A golden plane unfolded in front of the heavy battleship doctrine. The plane did not block, it offered. The ship slid half a kilometer into it and came back wrong, folds inverted, mass compressed in a kindness that looked like cruelty. The husk tumbled, compact and perfect as a child's marble. The third lesson arrived delicately. A gray mist, unimpressive, unmilitary, settled across 10 destroyers. Lights dimmed, then failed. Thrusters coughed into quiet. Targeting screens resolved to a line of poetry. Returned to basic settings. On the bridges, Engineers cried out as their beloved panels became mere furniture. "This is not war," Benkar said, throat dry. "It's a demonstration." "Correct," Naomi said, "because honesty is also a weapon." Celt captains, trained to attack, attacked. The void glittered with 1,000 attempts at denial. Hearthfall's local defense craft lifted, a dozen skiffs that intelligence had labeled agricultural sheriffs. They moved with an ease that suggested they were practicing penmanship, not combat. A skiff drifted past a carrier, tapped its flank with a line of blue. The carrier's drives went quiet the way old arguments go quiet when finally answered. On Preter's pride, Vexen stared. "How many ships do they have?" he demanded. "Indeterminate," came the reply. "Sensors resolve reflections. Some signatures appear inside occluded zones, some step from null." "From where?" The officer did not answer because language had not been budgeted for this. "Admiral Benkar," Naomi said, every syllable placed like a tile in a temple floor. "Order a halt. You will not be harmed. Medical corridors are prepared for your wounded." "We have no wounded," he snapped. "Wounded is not limited to bodies," Naomi said. "Doctrine can hemorrhage." Benkar gripped the rail. "Why didn't you warn us?" "We did," Naomi said. "For 2,000 years we have warned by treaty, by memory, by restraint. Warning is not the absence of signal, it is the presence of patience. You misread quiet as emptiness." Celt ships began transmitting surrender signals. Vexen overrode them twice. On the third override his console refused to obey. It displayed instead a sentence in Celt legal code, correct down to the semicolons. Preter's authority suspended due to systemic risk to Celt survivability. Somewhere, a human had studied their constitution well enough to rescue them from their own rhetoric. "Cease fire," Benkar said hoarsely. "Cease." Across the battle space, human weapons tilted upward, then cooled like a teacher deciding the lesson had landed. Hearthfall's panels rotated back to sun. The white craft did not move. Naomi Reed spoke into the sudden, aching quiet. "We will hold what remains of your fleet in place. Engines will be rendered incapable of making fresh mistakes. Send your wounded to the corridors. Then send your lawyers." Preter Vexen sagged into his chair and discovered that pride is a poor flotation device. Benkar, whose smirk had gone missing, found a camera and faced it as if finally meeting an honest mirror. "For the record," he said quietly, "this was not a battle. It was arithmetic." 3 days later, the conclave was more crowded than gravity intended. Emergency seating deployed from the walls like petals accepting rain. Species that had not shared air since the epoch of ash sat elbow to elbow with the decorum of people who would very much like to keep breathing. Elder Archivist Calmer addressed them first, because someone had to open the book to the right page. Holograms bloomed, maps braided with old oaths, fragments of charters signed at tables rough with history. "There is a story we have called myth for the comfort of calling it myth," he said. "Humans did not disappear from power. They stepped aside from its stage because they discovered a tautology. Conquering is easy work, governing is perpetual. They chose a harder discipline, stewardship." Murmurs slicked the air. The warrior collectives delegate rose, scales bright with anger. "Are we then pets? Is our peace a leash?" Naomi Reed entered from the side aisle without trumpet or guard. She walked the way engineers walk, aware of load-bearing points. The chamber parted. She took the podium not like a throne but like a desk. "Stewardship is not leash," she said. "It is promise. For 2 millennia we have coached by treaty, nudged by market, blocked wars quietly, seeded cures without signatures. We kept the mask on because masks keep audiences from mistaking the actor for the play. The Daiichi chimed. Why unmask now? Because someone set fire in a theater, Naomi said. Masks do not beat flame. She gestured and new images rose. Hearthfall yesterday and Hearthfall always. A planet that grows bread and tucked beneath its loam the patient machinery of refusal. Our colonies are not forts pretending to be farms, Naomi said. They are farms that remember how to build forts. We believe peace should be ordinary. We prepare as if it might not be. Luma, diminished but luminous, asked the question many were afraid to. What do you want? The same as before, Naomi said. To keep the graph flat where it should be, to spike it upward where suffering lives, to leave our neighbors free enough to surprise us with goodness. In return, we expect the simple arithmetic of survival. Honor your treaties. Do not test civilizations you do not understand. Invest in your children more than your hulls. The warrior delegate spat. And if a species declines to be tutored, then we grade, Naomi said, and for a single heartbeat the room understood that mercy can be a steel girder. The Celt will survive. Their fleets are caged, not shattered. Their factories will be redirected. Their schools will exchange hymns to conquest for classes in engineering, law, and agriculture. Their poets will have scholarships. Poets? Calmer asked, smiling despite himself. War is easiest when language is lazy, Naomi said. We will make it harder. A representative from the Free Worlds Alliance raised a trembling hand. How can we be sovereign if we are watched? Naomi did not flinch. Sovereignty is not the right to make any mistake. It is the right to make most mistakes without being erased. We watch because we are also watched by the consequences of our power. We police ourselves first. That is why we can afford to be kind. In the cheap seats, a young delegate from a Dust Belt republic whispered to his mentor, they could have ruled us openly. His mentor, older than the word street, replied, they still might. Better to make it unnecessary. Naomi closed with something that was not quite a warning and not quite hope. You saw outdated equipment at Hearthfall. That was by design. One never begins a lesson with graduate texts. Please take the lesson while it is still gentle. Silence fell, and in it 1,000 calculations were performed, some on paper, some in hearts. The conclave voted not to censure but to codify. The council would be recognized as the primary forum for disputes, now with human delegates seated openly. Luma's glow brightened, relief, or simply the return of air to a room that had been holding it. After adjournment, Calmer found Naomi at the side exit where important people slip out to become ordinary again. Ambassador, he said, thank you for letting me deliver a warning even if it could not be heard. Warnings are seeds, Naomi answered. Sometimes they sprout late. He nodded toward the stars visible through the station's viewport. Will you put the mask back on? We prefer it, Naomi said. But masks are for weather, not climate. The climate has changed. On Hearthfall, the compacted marble that had once been a battleship sat under a temporary dome. Children filed past in quiet lines, holding slates. Their teacher, a farmer with sun lines at the eyes, spoke gently. This, she said, is what happens when arithmetic is used without ethics. Tomorrow we will return to soil chemistry. Ethics lives there too. And somewhere far from those children, in a quarantined hangar within a Celt shipyard, engineers studied blueprints that were really poems about hydraulics, supply chains, and water rights. A small sign hung above their workbench in careful Celt script. Learn the hard way. We'll teach the easier way. The galaxy did not become safer by decree. It became safer by habit. For the first time in a long time, habit felt possible. The first Celt child to meet a human teacher expected a jailer. She found a gardener. Hearthfall's humanitarian corridors opened both ways. Carriers that once brought grain now ferried doctors, engineers, and, more controversially, artists to Celt Prime. Over the red horizon, human airframes wrote patient ellipses, their contrails dissolving into a sky that had learned the taste of defeat. The sign outside the largest reorientation complex was in Celt script, carved by Celt hands. Center for Civil Arts and Applied Engineering. Underneath, in smaller letters, open syllabus, no prerequisites. Admiral Benkar stepped from a shuttle and stood very still. He had surrendered his insignia but not his posture. A human with gray at the temples greeted him. She wore the same navy cloth Naomi Reed preferred. "Director Hall," she said, offering a hand. "This facility is for builders. You may help us decide what your people build next." "We built fleets," Benkar said. "You built habits," Hall replied. "Fleets are symptoms." Inside, Celt youths clustered around a table where a human technologist was dismantling a pulse rifle and turning each component into a lesson. Metallurgy to chemistry, optics to philosophy. "A feedback loop doesn't know if it's measuring a beam or a budget," he said. "Design for stability or you will design for collapse." "Why poetry?" a Celt instructor demanded later, staring at a classroom where students were writing couplets in their harsh, beautiful language. "Because war is easiest in prose," Director Hall said. "Prose cleans the blood from our verbs. Poetry forces us to taste it." In the courtyard, a Celt mother approached a human medic. "What will become of the praetor?" she asked. "We do not see him on the screens. He will face a tribunal," the medic said. "Not ours, his, by your own law with your constitution restored to its full, inconvenient strength." "Mercy," the mother whispered. "Justice that remembers tomorrow," the medic answered. Naomi Reed visited twice a day and never stayed long. She walked the workshops, the clinics, the recital hall where a choir learned harmonies that did not sharpen into a war chant. She listened more than she spoke. When she did speak, she asked questions that sounded like instructions. "What will feed your children? What will reduce your prisons? What will make treason boring?" Elder archivist Calmer taught a seminar titled Histories We Survived. He did not hide the human presence in old treaties. He pointed at maps that had been edited by Mercy. "Stewardship," he told the room, "is a choice that must be repeated daily. When it is no longer repeated, it is no longer real." A small clutch of Celt officers still wore the posture of denial. One afternoon they cornered Director Hall by the window that framed the city's melted pride. "Say the quiet part," their captain insisted. "You rule." Hall looked at the window. "We could," she said. "That is not the quiet part. The quiet part is that ruling would be easier than this." "Why not take the easy path?" "Because easy is a predator," Hall said. "We hunt predators." In a repurposed factory, human civil engineers taught Celt foremen to thread water lines through warrens that once fed ammunition. "Water wins wars before they begin," a human said, sketching distribution graphs. "Every child who isn't thirsty is a soldier who never happens." At dusk, Benkar found Naomi on a roof under the red light of Celt Prime's sun. "Your mercy humiliates," he said. "Humiliation is optional," Naomi replied. "It is pride stripped of makeup. Mercy is arithmetic extended into the future. We are calculating with you this time. He stared at the city. We called you farmers. We still are, Naomi said. So are you if you choose. War planted itself in your schools for 3 generations. Harvest takes longer when weeds have deep roots. Down in the complex, a Celt child finished a poem with a line that surprised her into tears. My armor was a story I outgrew. Her teacher did not correct the metaphor. Instead, she circled it. Wear this into the world, the teacher said. It is lighter. That night, Naomi wrote a brief to the conclave. Celt reorientation ahead of schedule. Recommend scholarship exchanges. Request joint law clinics to reframe doctrine on sovereignty and rescue. She hesitated, then added a line the lawyers would hate. Also recommend a music festival. The conclave's reply arrived before dawn. Luma's signature glowed like a soft lantern. Approved. A poet in the machine Daiichi appended a haiku flickering between ones and zeros. Arithmetic heals. When the minus hands its chalk to a patient sum, Naomi smiled in the red light. Stewardship had another long day in it. Good, so did she. The tribunal chamber in Celt Prime was not built for mercy. It had the acoustics of a threat. High walls, hard benches, a dais designed to make defendants look small. The human observers refused a redesign. Use your room, Naomi told the Celt judiciary. Let it scare you into honesty. Praetor Vexen stood without insignia in a tunic the color of admission. The charge sheet was long in words and short in excuses. Unlawful aggression, constitutional sabotage, reckless endangerment of the Celt people. Under Celt law, the state itself brought suit. Under the restored constitution, the people could speak. They did. Witnesses for the prosecution were not human admirals but Celt quartermasters who tallied spoiled grain shipped to buy louder drums. Midwives who held infants under flickering war lights while budgets starved clinics. A teacher who had been instructed to change a poem into a chant and quit instead. The courtroom learned that conquest is expensive even before it fails. Vexen's counsel argued doctrine and destiny. We are a warrior species, he said. We were forged to expand. Forged by whom? Asked a newly reinstated constitutional judge. By ancestors who profited from your definition of glory. Elder Calmer testified last for the prosecution. He brought no holograms. He carried a single dog-eared treaty printed on pulp. The third accord of Iron, he said. Signed by Celt. Broken by Celt. This is not a foreign chain. It is your own handwriting. When the defense called witnesses, Admiral Benkar surprised everyone by taking the stand. He did not advocate for Vexen, he confessed. I built ships to win applause, he said. I called it patriotism because the word let me sleep. When the arithmetic arrived, it woke me. I request work detail, not exile. Put me in a school. The gallery murmured. Benkar turned to the Celt public cameras. For those who still follow me, he said, follow me here. Outside the chamber, another court convened, one with no bench and no gavels. In a conclave side room, human civilians wrestled humans in uniform over a doctrine drafted in precise, unforgiving clauses. The proportional veil. It defined how much of humanity's strength could be shown, and when, and to whom, without collapsing the balance between deterrence and dignity. An admiral with hands like ship ribs spoke first. We cannot ambush every empire into good behavior forever. We need the option to end threats decisively, publicly, once. Fear is fast. A sociologist answered with numbers that looked like broken bones. Public fear is a poor cement. It hardens quickly, then it cracks. Stewardship is not a campaign, it is city maintenance. We do not salt the streets because winter might return. Naomi listened, then drew a small square on the shared display. Here is our veil, she said, thick where pride is brittle, thin where learning is possible. Hearthfall was thick. The Celt tribunal is thin, we show them their own law holding. Isn't that manipulation? The Admiral asked. Only if we pretend they are puppets, Naomi said. They are neighbors. Neighbors share fences and also recipes. The veil passed by 2 votes with a sunset clause that would force its renewal in 10 years. Luma, hovering like breath, recorded the language in the conclave roll with a kind of relief. We prefer rules that expire unless love renews them, the speaker said. That way the law must remain loved. Back in the Celt court, the verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentence shocked no one and everyone. Removal from office, lifelong civic conscription, and a ban on military procurement roles. Vexen would not be martyred, he would be utilized. On the way out, Naomi found him waiting in a side hall with its own bad acoustics. I imagined a dungeon, he said. You will have something harder, Naomi replied. A desk, a chair that creaks, forms that matter. You will count schools. Why me? Because no one knows waste like a former spender, she said. Teach your successors thrift. He stared. You speak as if I will be forgiven. I speak as if forgiveness were useful, Naomi said. Forgiveness without utility is sentiment. Utility without forgiveness is tyranny. We prefer both, braided. In the plaza, Celt families gathered to read the verdict on public boards. Some cheered, some cried, some simply went home to cook. A human volunteer updated a sign, court hours, legal aid, job placement. Beside it, a chalkboard hosted a poem exchange. The first line was in Celt. We tasted iron and learned we had tongues for bread. A child copied it carefully. Courts that don't break become schools without trying. Stewardship is not a crown, it is a chore chart. After triumph, chores look like demotions. In a room nobody photographed, the Aegis Directorate convened under the flag of contingency. They were humans with clean shoes and dirty hearts, not evil, Naomi would later say, merely tired. Tired of late nights and careful thresholds, tired of poise, tired of making the galaxy safe for fallible neighbors. End the masquerade, said one director. Declare hegemony, publish the high arsenal, fit the conclave to a human keel and sail. Ruling openly will invite revolt, another warned. So will endless ambiguity, the first snapped. Every time we veil, we train predators to test the fabric. The Celt were a mid-tier nuisance. What happens when someone clever comes? Someone clever had come. Across 4 systems, a network that called itself the brokerage slithered into the corridors meant for ambulances, tasting for profit. They built nothing. They sold trajectories, people data, scrap rumor. In Celt space, they offered protection rackets dressed as logistics. In Hearthfall orbit, they courted sullen Celt captains with wages for sabotage. In a frontier where human monitoring thinned to respect sovereignty, they laced contraband through perfectly legal trade. Naomi's office received the first credible report from a Celt mother who had learned to write her name not in petition but in plans. Men with clean hands and shipyard passes asked my son to carry a box. He refused. They said they were conclave subcontractors. They were not. She included photographs of boots, clean, expensive. Naomi read and felt the cold that means memory. They're probing for fractures, she told Director Hall. They want the story to change genres, from lesson to farce. The Aegis Directorate took the dossier and pressed their case. "Permit us to publish the arsenal of night," they said. "Show the galaxy what we store under the farms. We end slander with spectacle." Naomi invited them to Hearthfall. She took them past the marble of a folded battleship, past the classroom where a child was learning water math, to a hangar that smelled like oil and helpfulness. At its center sat a vehicle no human had ever shown to another species, a ranger craft with a long nose, just big enough for a crew of 4 and a conscience. "This is Quietus," Naomi said, running a hand along the matte hull. "She hunts without headlines. She does not end wars, she ends excuses." Aegis' eyes glittered. "How many?" one asked. "We never answer that question," Naomi said. "Quantity is for dictators, quality is for plumbers." "What does it do?" another pressed. "It goes where a treaty is being eaten," Naomi said. "It brings law to the wolf's mouth." The Directorate wanted scale. Naomi offered specificity. "We will authorize a limited operation," she said. "We hunt the brokerage, we do not terrify the galaxy. We bring back ledgers and names, not trophies. We do it with partners." "Partners slow us," an Aegis man objected. "Partners speed legitimacy," Naomi said. "Quietus will carry a Kelt customs officer. He will sign the warrants." The man blanched. "With a Kelt aboard we cannot deploy the full." Naomi raised a hand. "We will not deploy the full anything. We will deploy enough." In the back, Elder Calmer coughed gently. "The archivist would like to remind the strategists," he said, "that empires always die of misreading scale." Naomi tipped him a look of gratitude. "The hunt begins," she told the room, "but the masquerade does not become a parade. We keep our mask within reach. We wear it when the children sleep." Quietus launched at civil dawn, a sliver of purpose cutting east across a sky that had learned better weather. On board, a human pilot who had once taught arithmetic to prisoners, a systems engineer with a farm tattoo, a Kelt customs officer who looked seasick in the air, and Naomi herself, because stewardship delegates badly. "Why you?" Director Hall had asked the night before. "Because if we catch the wolf," Naomi said, fastening her harness, "I want to be the one who asks it about its childhood." They found the first brokerage node in the shadow of a fuel moon that smelled of leaked promise. To the naked eye, it was a repair yard, a neat rectangle of light and labor. To Quietus, it was a ledger with teeth. The ship did not decloak, it unfurled a conversation. "Customs inspection," the Kelt officer announced, voice shaky but audible. "Conclave authority plus local warrant." "Transmission received," replied a voice too polite. "Please wait while we arrange refreshments." Refreshments arrived as drones carrying flowers and data-wiping signals. Quietus ate the signals like bread and reseeded the bouquet into a compost algorithm that would later grow evidence. Naomi stood behind the Kelt officer, just near enough for courage to borrow posture. "Ask for the book no one shows," she murmured. The officer swallowed. "Present the secondary ledger," he said. Silence. Then the kind of laughter that knows it is being recorded. "We are private enterprise," the yard manager purred. "We have no secondary ledger." "Then accept a scan," Naomi said, stepping forward. She did not raise a weapon. She raised a document, 3 pages, bilingual, stamped with the conclave seal and a farmer's mud. It defined contraband of stability. Not drugs, not guns. Extractive arrangements that starve institutions. The yard manager tried charm, then threat, then prayer to a god named delay. Quietus did not pray. It did math. It mapped who signed for what, when, and at which door. It found payments routed through shell cooperatives with names like Harbor of Honest Work and Pensioners United for Progress. It found interdicted Celt spare parts slated for civic lighting in a district where the lights already shone. The drones attacked. Quietus declined to participate in their fear. The ship sank its teeth into bandwidth and chewed. Screens went black, then honest. The Celt officer exhaled for the first time in an hour. "I am signing the seizure," he said, hands steadier. "By Celt law. Please note, by Celt law." They raided 3 more nodes in 2 weeks, moving like a proverb, quickly, quietly, everywhere the rumor said later. Each time the same pattern: clean shoes, dirty hearts, paperwork sharp enough to cut throats. Each time Quietus returned with names for prosecutors instead of wrecks for parades. The Aegis Directorate fumed. "We could have ended the network in a night," one message read. Naomi responded with a photograph. A Celt classroom where students were building a water sensor from repurposed weapons optics. "Endings are cheap," she wrote. "Continuations cost. We pay in procedures." Then came a twist that was not a twist to anyone who studies consequences. The brokerage had patrons. Not a state, not a fleet. A guild of bored billionaires who collected crises the way others collect wines. They funded instability because volatility pays when you can afford to be liquid. They called themselves the Society for Necessary Friction. Quietus found their salon on a pleasure Taurus where the cocktails were named after ancient collapses. Naomi did not storm it. She booked a table. "Ambassador Reed," said the host, his smile an index of empty books. "We admire your moderation." "Thank you," Naomi said, looking past him at a wall of screens displaying markets that measured misery as optics. "Tell us," asked a patron with teeth like investments, "how long can you restrain yourself? How long can you hold the mask with one hand and the leash with the other?" Naomi sipped water. "As long as the children keep learning," she said. "As long as desks creak." He laughed. "You can't be everywhere." "No," Naomi said, "but our neighbors can." Signals bloomed. The Taurus lost exterior docking privileges one by one as allied ports rescinded access. Insurance algorithms refused to underwrite hulls flagged by conclave civil risk models. 1,000 small cities quietly passed procurement codes that forbade contracts with entities named on the friction list. It was not a war. It was a famine imposed on greed. The patron's smile thinned. "Is this the hunt?" "This is the beginning of ecology," Naomi said. "Predators exist. So do seasons. We do not poison the forest. We prune where it is diseased." Back on Hearthfall, the compacted marble was now ringed by a garden. Children planted herbs whose names teach patience: rosemary, thyme. On Celt Prime, Admiral Benkar stood at a blackboard and wrote a word he had tried to forget: budget. He taught how to read it as a love letter instead of a drumbeat. Peter Vexen, in an office with a window that faced a factory, signed a boring form that approved the boring purchase of bolts. He did not feel redeemed. He felt useful. That was better. Elder Calmer finished his course with a final lecture titled Ethics in Closed Systems. "We once believed history was made by thrones," he told the hall. "Then we believed it was made by markets. Now we must believe it is made by maintenance. Water lines, court calendars, school bells, contracts that do not leak." Naomi returned to the conclave and took her seat not at the center but 3 rows back where the work hums. Luma's glow was stronger these days. "You kept the veil," the speaker observed. "We folded it carefully," Naomi said. "There will be nights we need its warmth." "And if wolves gather again?" Luma asked softly. Naomi looked at the chamber's doors, the ones that retreat when they are wiser than men. "Then we hunt," she said, "but we bring leashes for ourselves." Outside the viewport, the galaxy turned with the old patience. Quietus slept in her hangar with the contentment of a tool put away sharp. The Aegis Directorate filed fewer memos and more grant applications. The Society for Necessary Friction found itself suing for permission to sell off assets. The courts replied with calendars that stretched to years. In the plaza below, a poem chalked on stone survived 3 rains. "We measured shadows and learned to plant straight rows. Harvest is slower, but the bread does not burn." The masquerade was not over, it had become voluntary. Stewardship remained a choice daily. Boring, sacred. The hunt would come when it must. For now, the arithmetic was merciful. And that, Naomi thought as she watched a janitor sweep the conclave steps with more care than ceremony, was the oldest victory a civilization could hope to keep.